All right, hello everybody. I'm Andrew, as was introduced. I'm very happy to be here. So, how many people turned up today and thought, this is fantastic, I'm going to hear about another standard? Anybody? A couple, that's okay, that's okay. We can be nerds later on, that's fine. For most of the rest of you, you're probably like this guy thinking, oh God, just make it stop, there's too many standards. Maybe, you know, you're here to hear about other things, and I'm going to try and talk to you about other things. But if you're in the payments industry, and I hope you are in the payments industry, because you're here for Milan Fashion Week, I've got some really bad news for you. Although I'm pretty sure I could carry off the walk. You saw the walk? Was that okay? It was okay. Anyway, so for those of you in the payment industry, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to answer, or at least see those answers, the answer I'm going to give you at the end of the presentation. What do you want from payments? What do your customers want from payments? How has the way that you are paying, that you process payments, that you use payments, that the way your customers want to use payments, how's that changed over the last 10 years, over the last 15 years, over the last 20 years? So think on that, and we will get to that at the end. But at the start, I'm going to go through some definitions. So when we talk about mobile payments, it really is going to be a different thing depending on who you talk to. Sometimes when you talk to somebody about mobile payments, you're talking about having mobile banking on your phone, the ability to connect to your bank and transfer and make payments through direct debits and so forth on your phone. That's one aspect of mobile payments. Sometimes when you talk to people about mobile payments, you're talking about using your phone as a replacement for your card, as a payment instrument, so you can tap it onto a payment acceptance terminal or a payment acceptance device to make a payment. And that's mobile payments to some people. When I'm talking about mobile payments right now, what I'm talking about is using a mobile phone or a tablet, what I'm going to call a COTS device, to accept payments. To have somebody take their card and maybe tap the card onto that device, maybe have somebody enter their PIN onto that device and use that device to process payments. So we've been working with mobile payments as the council for quite a long time. And I've, in fact, been working with mobile payments for quite a long time. A quick aside, my first job out of university, which was many years ago, was actually working on a mobile payment device that was connected to a mobile phone. Back when, this was before GSM, before CDMA, it was a very long time ago. So this has been around for a long time, and we've really been looking at how we can evolve this. And so from the council point of view, we've had different aspects that we've been working on. So it started off really with that concept of a terminal connected to a mobile phone and how you might use that. Now in 2014 we had our paper accepting mobile payments with smartphone or tablet that existed, that talked about the different types of things you could do, how that worked, connecting devices onto it. This was back when phone bezels were really big and the screen was really small and the phones were quite small and so forth. And that's certainly something that was used and it's been used now for almost 20 years or so. But things have changed. And people have thought, you know what if we had still an external reader, but now we want to do something a little bit different, and we want to have the ability to accept PINs on the mobile device. So we're using not a complete separate terminal that's using the phone as a modem, for example, but just using an external reader, and then you enter your PIN on the device. And so as a council, we've worked on that. We had software-based PIN on COTS standards, SPoC, SPoC, live long and prosper, that's been around since 2018. And that talked about the security requirements for doing that, for having an external reader, card, PIN on the mobile device. Things moved on. Bezels got smaller, phones got bigger. And people said, you know what I really want to do is be able to use the card, the contactless card, and have that tap onto the mobile phone directly. Great, that's fantastic. We've got a standard for that. In 2019, a year later, we produced a CPoC standard, contactless payments on COTS, that talked about the requirements for how that was going to happen, how you could do that. But it was very much contactless only, and it was very much not PIN-based. You could tap your card, you couldn't enter a PIN. And obviously in Europe, there are certain requirements where you might need to have escalation to secure customer authentication, strong customer authentication during a payment processing method. So this brings us finally to the topic of today, which is MPoC. So with MPoC, it's really the evolution of that path that we started way back when, terminals connecting to mobile devices, PINs on mobile devices, contactless cards on mobile devices. How do we bring all of that together so that we have one standard that addresses all of these things? It provides a modular approach to how you might do this without really trying to dictate technologies, acceptance methods. It allows you to switch and change, if you like, the types of ways that you might accept that. Maybe you want to have a solution like the old SPoC solution, or the SPoC standard still exists and will still continue to exist, where you have an external card reader, you accept the cards on that external card reader, and you're entering the PIN on a phone. Perfect. MPoC supports that. Maybe you want to do something like CPoC, where you've got the contactless card that you can tap onto the back of your COTS device, accept that card, and maybe have now the PIN also on that mobile device. So both the contactless card and the PIN onto the same COTS device. Perfect, great, we've got a standard for that. It's going to be MPoC. Maybe you want to bundle this all up. Maybe you want to have external readers, as well as the ability to support the contactless cards, the PIN on the device. Maybe sometimes you want to be able to do the card reader, use that because it has a better contactless volume. It essentially has the ability to process cards a little bit quicker, a little bit easier. The user interface is a little bit better. The user experience is a little bit better. But maybe you also want to have the tap on the card as well because it may not be always the reader around. There's convenience factors to that. You want to offer different solutions. With either of those methods, you might want to have the PIN entered for strong customer authentication. Fantastic. We've got a standard for that. It's called MPoC. It will be out towards the end of the year. But MPoC's more of this as well. The M stands for mobile, but it could also stand for modular. And I mentioned that it is a modular standard, and we've tried to provide adaptability in this. And the previous standards that we had, SPoC and CPoC, they were whole solution standards. You assessed the whole thing. You had listed the whole thing. This is a solution that provides the ability to accept cards or PINs on mobile devices. MPoC is a modular standard, and we're going to have different modules, different listings that allow for those things to appear. So ultimately, we have 3 different MPoC products that can be listed as part of an overall solution. We have the MPoC software. And the MPoC software is essentially the software that is used on the mobile device to accept the card and the PIN and do the security, do the attestation and monitoring, as well as the software in the back end that does the attestation and monitoring as well. Now, I haven't mentioned attestation and monitoring yet. It was something that was included as part of SPoC and CPoC, and it's all about providing software functions to attest the security of the execution environment and of the application that is performing the payment processing or is part of the payment processing. And so that attestation monitoring is really important. You can think of it almost like software-based tamper responsiveness. In the terminal world, we have hardware-based tamper responsiveness. Try and hack into the hardware, you break it, it detects that, it erases the keys. In these solutions, in these standards, we have software-based tamper responsiveness, where the attestation and monitoring systems are constantly checking to see if the environments in which they're operating are secure. And so the MPoC software is both the software that accepts the payments on the device and performs that processing, as well as the attestation and monitoring software that exists in the back end and connects to that SDK, if you like, on the COTS device. So that's one. We also have the attestation and monitoring service as an MPoC product. There's the software, which is the technical aspect, but that software doesn't do anything. You take software, you throw it up in the air, it doesn't go anywhere because it's just bits, but if it was in a box, it'd fall to the ground. It doesn't do anything until you actually install it and you run it and you maintain it and you operate it, and you do all of those things. That's the attestation and monitoring service that does those things with the back-end component of the MPoC software. And then, of course, you have the overall solution, which includes the applications that run on the system that embed the SDKs, the software development kits, the COTS component of the MPoC software, and operate the key management and the decryption and so on and so forth, the processing environments, these sorts of things. Now, you can do all of this as a whole solution thing still. That's fine. I mentioned SPoC and CPoC was a whole solution standard. You can still say, you know what, I'm a whole solution shop. I'm going to do the whole thing. I'm not going to list my software. I'm not going to be using a separate attestation and monitoring service. Perfectly fine. You can do that as a whole solution aspect. We call that a monolithic solution. Alternatively, you can have these separate components that you use. And so to work with this, to allow for this modularity, we have 5 domains in the standard, and they're separated into operational domains and development domains, technical and operational. And you'll see that throughout both this presentation, the presentation I do later on as well. So domain 1, MPoC software, I've talked about this, COTS SDK, A&M, attestation and monitoring backend software. Domain 2 is for the MPoC application that takes that SDK and embeds it. And there's different ways that you have to assess or implement security in those applications depending on how the SDK works. And I'll get to that in a little while. You have domain 3, which is for the attestation monitoring service that is operating the MPoC software. You have domain 4, which is a bit of a catch-all for areas of the standard where it might be the MPoC solution provider who is implementing something, or it might be perhaps the application developer, or it might be the MPoC software developer. These are some things like distribution, key management, these sorts of things that get embedded into domain 4. And then domain 5 is specifically items that can only be implemented and provided by the MPoC solution provider. And so from a listing point of view, we have those 3 MPoC software products, 3 MPoC products, I apologize. The MPoC software, attestation monitoring service, MPoC solution, those are the ones in dark purple, and then there's that light one which ties back because of course you have the applications which are listed as part of this as well. So this is what the standard kind of looks like, and we've been working on this standard for quite some time now. And so I asked you a question right at the start, what do you want from payments? What do your customers want from payments? Still going to get around to that, I haven't forgot about it. But another question, so hopefully you can think about 2 questions at once. I know I'm asking a lot of you, but you know, I think you're up to it. So second question, how do you think we develop our standards? How do you think that we come up with these sorts of standards, the requirements and so forth? When you're thinking of that, do you imagine a bunch of serious people sitting in a room, someone stabbing the table with a pen, being very serious about a point, saying, I really need this one? Well, I'm going to be perfectly honest to you. It does happen sometimes. There are, you know, not so much voices raised, it's very intense discussions around things that we need to do. But it's not always that way, because we don't develop our standards in isolation. We do it with everybody in this room, with everybody as part of our PO structure as well. We have our requests for comment periods. And with MPoC, we had 2 requests for comments that we put out. And we had almost 1,000 individual comments that came back as part of those. And we receive those, we look at those, we integrate those, we go through them each individually, often multiple times, because we might look at it once, say, okay, we've seen this comment, we'll make change here, or maybe we don't think the comment needs to make a change, and so forth. And then we go through the other comments, and we're at comment 999, make a change, and hey, you know what? Let's come back to this one now, because that affects something that we made a decision on earlier on. And so through all of this, it changes the standard, and it makes the standard better. How much better and how much change? So this is a bit of a differential that you can see between what existed prior to the first RFC and what existed after the second RFC. All of that red on there, they're items that have been changed based on comments that our participating organisations made. They're items that have been changed to make the standard work better for our communities. They're items that have been changed to make the standard better. That's not to say that it was bad initially. That is to say, it is much better after the first RFC, it is much better after the second RFC, and hopefully it's going to be the best it can be when it's released. But, we'll still be listening to feedback when we release it as well. And one of the major changes that we made through all of this was about applications and about SDKs. So when we started with the first RFC, we had a concept of SDKs that was different. We only had one type of SDK. It was called a different name no one liked. We also had the concept of only one application. And so we've now changed that to allow for multiple applications in any solution. Multiple can mean as many as you like. And multiple SDKs in any MPoC software product. And multiple types of SDKs in any particular MPoC software product. So you can have applications that, once again, are monolithic. You create it, you don't integrate an SDK, you're creating it from scratch as part of your monolithic solution. Perfectly fine, no problem, we support that. We also have the ability to embed what we call a non-isolated SDK. This is an SDK where it is not protecting its memory space, or is unable to protect its memory space to a level of satisfaction. The satisfaction is outlined in the standard. And so the application that integrates it could potentially read sensitive data. In that context, that's okay. That's perfectly fine. But there's additional requirements that are levied against those applications because they have levels of security that need to be met. But we also have a concept of isolated SDKs. This is an SDK where it's been validated to isolate its memory space, to protect the sensitive assets of cardholder data and PIN that it's receiving, and to make sure that they're protected. So now the assessment of the application is a little bit more about, is it doing the right thing? Is it integrating the SDK in the correct way? Not, is it secure anymore? Because even if you compromise the application, because it's an isolated SDK, it's protecting the data that it uses. Each one of these application types can also expose APIs that allow for completely separate applications to talk through to these applications, the MPoC applications, to request payment. It can say, do a payment, here's an amount, processes payment for me. It then reads the card data, takes the PIN if it needs to, does all of that good stuff, and hopefully comes back with payment done. That's all fine. So you have essentially 3 different types of building an MPoC application, as well as exposing APIs for any plethora of other types of applications as well. So where does this leave us? So right now, we're very close to having MPoC released. And I say very close in standard ease, so it's not, a couple of days. It's still a little way off, but it's definitely coming out this year. We'll have the program guide coming out this year as well. We do need to have work done for submissions and portals, interfaces, and so forth. So that'll really be done next year. So standard out this year, the ability to accept reports next year. So at the start of this presentation, I asked you what you want from payments, what your customers want from payments. Everybody will have a different answer to that, I think, because everybody has a different business. And those different businesses have different needs for payments. And therefore, my answer to this is what you need is modularity. What you need is flexibility. What you need is the ability to produce an application that accepts payments for 10 different types of customers, or an application that accepts payments for 10 million different types of customers. That's what we've designed MPoC for. That's what we hope that you do with it. What we've done is create the standard. That's our job. When it comes out later this year, it's going to be your job as to what you do with it, how you integrate it, how you use it, how it is accepted, how it benefits the payment industry. I hope you do something interesting with it. Thank you.